Hey, good morning, everybody. How are you today? It's Thursday morning. This is Thursday Morning Live, and I am super excited about this morning's show, this morning's guest. Little different twist, some data, some information we're going to get. It'll be good. But hey, I want to welcome you. If you are new to Thursday Morning Live, I'm grateful you're here. Glad you're here. And we are here every Thursday morning at 8:30. Our focus is to try and bring on a Chicago entrepreneur, somebody, maybe a restaurant owner or a business owner. You know, we've had car mechanics on that own auto shops. We've had real estate people on. I try to really be entrepreneurial about this. So, hey, if you're someone or know someone who would love to throw their hat in the ring and be on this show, because we want to spotlight your business. We want to feature your business and help you maybe gain some traction and be a little bit more successful. So I love to network with individuals, and no better place than to do it live on Thursday morning on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and wherever else you might be live streaming from this morning. So I'm glad you're here. Speaking of that, if you are on YouTube, please smash the subscribe button and follow us. We're bringing out relevant content every day, specifically around multifamily and business entrepreneurship. So want to continue to bring that out to you, small clips, long reels, and give you data and information that's going to help your business and help you grow. One thing we always talk about is intentionality. Are you being intentional? Did you sit down Monday morning or Sunday night and plan out your week? And how are you doing? Are you staying on track? Are you moving in that direction that's going to help you keep growing? Because when we're intentional about achieving our goals and our dreams, we ultimately get there, don't we? You know, Harvard did that study years ago where people wrote down their goals, and 3% of that Harvard graduating class that wrote down their goals actually accomplished them, where the other 97% 20 years later did not accomplish those goals because they didn't write them down. So I'm hoping that you've got your written goals, you're reviewing them weekly, quarterly, and being intentional on a daily basis about what the next step is for you in your business. Hey, remember that you can follow us on social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you hang out, TikTok, Twitter, and continue to get relevant content, things that will help you continue to grow. So please subscribe. And if you are on Facebook and you want to join our Facebook community, go to Multifamily Unplugged and join the Facebook community there, because there is always updates on events coming up, on Thursday Morning Live that's coming up, on our Multifamily Unplugged or Insider Secrets podcast, anything that's going to help you grow and grow your business. Okay, let's get into the meat of this morning. My guest, Casey Schmagel from Chicago. He is with a company called Chicago Cityscape, and they're a real estate and community information platform. Let me bring Casey in real quick. So I know I killed your name. I'm so sorry.
You're not the first, and you won't be the last, Mike. So you're fully forgiven. It's Smagala. It's one of those difficult to pronounce Polish last names.
I know. You know what? And what's so funny is we just talked about it, right? And we just practiced, but I get going so fast sometimes that
it takes repetition.
Yeah. So I always challenge people on mine anyhow. So, you know, Morawski is not the most common name. Although what's kind of funny is I have met some people like on Facebook and that have come out and said, hey, are you related to me? Or, you know, because it's such an uncommon name. So
yeah. I run into that often too. There's a very kind of a Chicago famous guy named Stan Smagala, spelled exactly the same way. Played football at Notre Dame, then played football for the Dallas Cowboys. My brothers and I both played football in college as well, but we actually don't know how we're related. And he is also in real estate. So often I'll be talking to somebody maybe my father's age and like, oh yeah, I know your Uncle Stan. We did some deals back in the day. And I'm like, I know of Stan Smagala, but I've actually never met him in person. But seems like a very wonderful guy.
That's funny that people would just assume he's your uncle, you know?
Hey, you know, if it ever brought me a deal, I might just run with it.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. Hey, listen, so I always, and before we get into your background, because I want to hear now you're telling me that you played football, and I'd like to hear a little about that. But before we get into your background, one question I always start with is, in one word, Casey, what best describes you personally and professionally?
For me, I think that would be persistent. As the director of growth for Chicago Cityscape, when I came in, my business partner, Stephen Vance, who's just absolutely brilliant, had built an extraordinary platform that, I mean, well over 100 people were using at that point. But the folks who were using it, I don't think were using it as deeply and as getting as much out of it as they could. And so it took a lot of persistence to coach them and to bring them up to speed on the platform. And that was
Yeah.
just the folks that we had. We've grown significantly since then. And I either say I'm a glorified or unglorified sales guy sometimes. And that takes a heck of a lot of persistence. So if I had one word, that would be it.
Awesome. I love that because I think that in anything we need to do or we try to do, we need to be persistent at it. It doesn't happen most of the time overnight. I tell people all the time, hey, this is a marathon, not a sprint, right?
Yeah.
So, um, here's what I want to know. What is the director of growth? What does that mean?
Yep. So my partner Stephen Vance, about 9 years ago, started building a tool for his own work. He worked for a very successful permit expediting firm called Map Strategies. Heather Morrison, their CEO, is now a wonderful mentor to us. And Stephen is a coder and an urban planner. He is not a business growth pro, and he would say that in his own words. So we went out to dinner after I had used his platform on a previous campaign of mine for politics, not for real estate, actually. And I said, hey, I really liked using Cityscape. He said, who were your clients? And like, how many did you win last year? How many did you lose last year?
Mm.
What does your path to more clients look like next year? And he's like, Casey, it's like I like writing computer code. I like reading every article there is about urban planning in zoning changes in the city. He's like, I don't really that's not my bailiwick, is paying attention to the growth of the company. And so when I came in as our director of growth, what I focused on is who uses Chicago Cityscape right now, kind of falls into four buckets. And then I said, hey, well, who are their peers that we could go out and work with? And then we said, okay, the folks we work with right now, are there other folks at their company who could and should be using Cityscape? There's about 16 different ways you can grow a business based on called grow the top line. It's I can't remember who wrote the book, but it's fabulous. And we've kind of chosen three so far in ways to grow our company. So it's growing through the existing basic clients we have, growing through new clients, and then serving our clients with additional services through our core platform. So
Nice.
that's how I go about directing our growth at Cityscape.
Well, very interesting. So why don't you? I'd like to back up for a minute and talk about what it means to expedite, right? So you're talking about expediting permits and things like that through the uh, zoning system and building system in the
Yep, yep.
city. So
So it's
why don't
those
you?
very important efforts and bureaucracy that we grew out of. We're not a permit expediting firm, but we work with many, in fact. So I always kind of start explaining Cityscape in this way. There's a reason that Starbucks and McDonald's and some of the most successful national corporations in the United States always have the best corner lots in the trendiest urban neighborhoods in America. It's because they have more data on our communities than we do. And that's fine. There's nothing nefarious about that. At least I'm not going to say there is. But we at Cityscape believe that every single chamber of commerce and community development corporation an experienced real estate professional or emerging real estate broker deserves the same level to like micro level information that those larger corporations have. So what we've done over the past 9 years is we've aggregated, right now it's about 150 publicly available, some proprietary that we pay for, data sources all into one platform. So an entrepreneur can know like, hey, who owns that building? How many other pizza joints are in this section of the city? What can be built on that vacant lot? What are the government incentives available to do a development there? What are my closest transit assets? Rather than looking at 40 divorced, sometimes poorly run government platforms for those information, you just log into Cityscape and we have that intel right there for you.
And so you're really focused on the Chicago market, right? So being that we're a Chicago presence and a Chicago platform with Thursday Morning Live, your Chicago presence could really benefit just about any business owner, any real estate agent, any lender, anybody who's looking to maybe buy a lot, buy a building, do some
Yeah.
work. So it sounds like, I'm a big what if guy. I like to ask the what if questions. So it sounds to me like your platform will kind of answer a lot of those questions on specific intersections and parcels and what's going on in the city or in that ward um,
Yeah.
and neighborhood, right?
Yeah, and Mike, you're really heading in the right direction when you say ward and neighborhood, because these things really matter. If you're an entrepreneur looking to locate a business, or if you're a real estate broker on the commercial, residential, or industrial end, there's the due diligence you're going to do on a property, right? So, like, are there any violations on this property? What are the permits that have been pulled? Are there underground storage tanks? What exactly can I build there? Having the tools to consolidate the time that it takes to do that due diligence is really valuable, either to you as a broker, or honestly, if you're a broker, to your clients, to be able to respond to them in the process of a phone call, rather than saying, hey, let me get all of the questions that you have about that property. Okay, give me a few days and I'm going to look into all these government portals and get back to you. You can be on the phone with Mike and answer those questions for them. But you had mentioned wards and neighborhoods. We also break the city down into what we call place reports. So you can look at all 50 wards, all 77 community areas, every zip code, every neighborhood, every special service area or TIF district. Those are all called place reports in our platform. So if you wanted to know, how many dry goods stores are in Albany Park, or how many new developments are happening in Fulton Markets, you can look that up in a place report in our platform. Yeah.
So how much of the platform is run off of AI? Where like I could, like I can go to Chat GPT, I can type a question and I get a series of answers, right? Whether it's a title, a subject line for an email, or whether it is something that's going on, or how much of your platform is run off of AI?
Yeah, I would shy away from describing what we do as AI, but a lot of it is done through automation. It pleasantly surprises people, and I never give this answer, because we do have 150 data sources that pipe into our platform, and folks always want to know, like, what is your army? But most of the time, it's actually not through AI. It's through a little bit more automations, or what are called APIs, to tap into that publicly available data portal and pull it into our platform. But then we contextualize it. So often somebody will want to know, well, hey, I see a construction fence going up around my apartment. What might that be? And one way that you can look at that is through building permit data. But you can even look further back than that to say, okay, was there a zoning change that was prior to that permit being pulled, and who's the developer behind that zoning change? That's something that, maybe someday AI would be able to answer for you, but that's kind of our value proposition. Is most times folks ask for one piece of information, but then we can layer it with other pieces of data that contextualize that what's actually happening in that community.
Wow, interesting. Well, we're pretty deep in this morning already. Why don't we circle back and let's talk about your background a little bit?
Okay.
I want to hear about how you got to this point and working with Cityscape and your football history and that.
Yeah. I would say there's a few life events that have really led me here. The first of which, we'll go way back, is had really good parents growing up, but my parents separated. We moved in with my mom into what we now politely call workforce housing. And for me, it worked out really well. And I didn't really realize this until I started studying urban planning. It's like, well, man, that apartment complex, it was all like moms with like just kids like us. And we had a ton of fun because there's a bunch of other kids our age. But that workforce housing complex also had a bus that took my mom to a job retraining program. It was also in walking distance of my elementary school. Once I got further into college, I realized, like, yeah, that's urban planning. We were very fortunate to have like those social and human services within walking distance when my mom was in a really tight situation. So when I went to college, I studied political science and urban planning. And my first job out of school was helping run a community center for immigrant kids and families in my neighborhood, where we could see that real estate and real estate development had a really big impact on them. I'm not going to say positive or negative, but it really affected them. That led me into politics in the city of Chicago. And I ran for alderman in 2019. in the 39th ward. And I lost, unfortunately, although the person who won is doing a very fine job now, I'll say. But that was the first time I discovered Cityscape. My kind of core for running for city council was to drive more businesses into my section of the city. So it's like, I need data to be able to talk intelligently about this. And I discovered Cityscape on my campaign. I lost, went to work for an artificial intelligence company doing business growth for them, but synced up with Stephen Vance, who had originally founded Cityscape. And in the most short-sighted statement ever over dinner, this was 2020, I leaned in and I said, Stephen, I said, man, I think Cityscape is fascinating. And I said, this AI company I'm working for doing sales right now, I'm like, I think this COVID thing, I think it's here to stay. And I might, be in lockdown for like a week or two. How about I try to drum up some business for Cityscape in that time? And he's like, man, I think that would be great. Turns out I never went back to work for that artificial intelligence company. Stephen and I landed a 6-figure contract that allowed both of us to quit our jobs and do Cityscape full time, starting in 2021, I believe it was. So yeah, that's kind of from being a really little kid, fortunate that like I had social services and infrastructure around me, to working for an artificial intelligence company, learning how to grow a business, and then discovering one that I was really in love with and I wanted to help grow and had a passion for.
Well, good for you. That's awesome. How about the football piece?
I was very fortunate that North Park University had low standards for middle linebackers and political science majors, and I got in. So I got to play ball there all 4 years. I was a captain of our defense for 2 as a middle linebacker. And again, when you ask me kind of what describes me personally and professionally, persistent is definitely one of them. I loved playing ball all 4 years of college, made some lifelong friends, did not win many games at all. But in many ways, I think it prepared me very well for a life in business. It's, you put in a lot of cold calls, you do a lot of outreach, you go to a lot of events, and like you're definitely not going to win every one. I mean, you're lucky to win, 3 out of 10, but you've got to be persistent and keep showing up. And those ones that you lost, for me, it's kind of like watching game film. It's like you still got to go back and think, hey, when I met that person, they didn't buy Cityscape. Is it because I was just talking about me the whole time? Because like I love my company and I'm proud of what we build, but I get a little, big chested and I talk about how cool our platform is, but I'm not talking about the problem that they might have that we might be able to solve. And so I think playing sports in college and high school kind of helped me be a little more self-reflective and take things on the chin a little better than other folks can.
Yeah. I like that you said about making phone calls, because there's a lot of persistence in making phone calls, right? Because if you're a sales guy or a saleswoman and you're trying to make sales calls, I always tell people, I say, hey, look, the sale is not in the initial call. It's in the follow-up. Right. And in order to follow up, you have to be persistent, right? You got to, my word's tenacity. And so you've got to be tenacious and continue to follow up and talk to people, because, I remember years ago when I first started in the real estate business, or even further back than that, when I was in the construction business, I could follow up 2 or 3 times with someone and get a sale. But now all of a sudden it's 12 or 15 times that you have to touch people. And, I think too many people lean on social media, lean on email, when they really should be leaning more on the direct contact, pick up the telephone, talk to somebody, because that's how we build relationships and get those sales done.
So I 100% agree with you, Mike. And I would add that not just continuing to be persistent and tenacious, but showing up with value as well. And I'm a little spoiled as somebody who, runs a data providing company, that I have the same experience. I might often have to make like 12 touches to really get somebody's attention. What has helped me, and you don't need Cityscape to do this, it's in any line of business, but I always try to show up with some information. So like here's an example. We work with a lot of real estate brokers and developers or chambers of commerce. When I have one that I think we could do business with, very seldom am I saying like, hey, Mike, I saw your real estate broker. Do you want to buy Chicago Cityscape? What I'm able to do is I'm able to go to their listings and say, hey, Mike, I saw that you have a lot of listings in Albany Park. Here's 4 developments that are coming down the pike that I thought that you might be interested in. Send him that email. Mike is probably very busy and is not going to get back to me. No worries. About 8 days later, I'm going to say, hey, Mike, there's 4 new restaurants that opened up in Albany Park. I think that might make for some interesting social media content for you. Here's the list of those 4 businesses. And here's a real estate broker who uses Chicago Cityscape who posts regular social media content like that. So what I'm getting at is if you can find an information source that allows you to touch base with who you want to do business with and be constantly providing content or data or information they can use rather than just like, hey, do you want to buy my product? Hey, do you want to buy my product? Because then like you're showing up as a person of service rather than just a salesperson. I would love to say I do that 100% of the time. I definitely do not. But I do know when I'm on my best, I'm always showing up with value in those prospect calls
Yeah.
or emails, whatever that looks like.
And I'm such an advocate for data providers, right? I think that was one of the reasons you and I kind of connected, is because, I remember growing up in the real estate business 30 years ago, and there was a guy that I used to go to these seminars with who said, there has to be a way that I can provide this expired listings and for sale by owners to other real estate agents. I'm producing the information for myself. Why don't I try to sell this? And now he's built a big data provider that, he nationally just sells expired listings and
wow.
for by owners. It's interesting what you can do with data when you have enough data.
Yeah.
Just like when we're looking at multifamily properties, I mean, we look at the data before we ever look at the deal. It's in the data, right? Because it's all data driven.
Yeah. I'm going to butcher the quote from Mike Bloomberg, so I won't try to repeat it. But he once said, like, I'm not in the finance. This is when he was building Bloomberg and the terminal. He said, I'm not in the software business. I'm not in the hardware business. I'm not in the technology business. I'm in the information and data business.
Right.
Because that could inform so many other parts of your business and your operation. So it's I really like being in this type of company at this time in this moment, because real estate brokers right now, it's harder and harder with a lack of inventory being on the market. So similar to the company that you explained from one of your friends, somebody can use us to find and create off-market opportunities, whether that's through properties that are vacant and no one has looked at because they don't fully understand that local market, or something that's been in a tax sale, or something that has multiple violations, or something that is a 2-flat, but it has the zoning to be 4 units and eligible for an accessory dwelling unit. That's information that usually isn't available in so many other places, but it's really valuable to a broker to show up with value and show up with information to say, like, hey, Mike, are you interested in selling this property because it's worth more because of these line items here?
Just a couple of quick comments. And McDonald's years ago said that learned that they were not in the hamburger business, they were in the land business, in the real estate business, right? And I have always remember a comment that Gary Keller from Keller Williams Real Estate made years ago, which was, "You are not a real estate agent; you're a marketing company. You have to treat yourself. You have to figure out what business you're actually in, I think, in order to be successful." And that's go ahead.
We feel that same way, both about the real estate brokers and the chambers of commerce and nonprofits that we work with. Way too often, 2/3 of Chicago gets labeled by the nightly news as, like, undesirable or whatnot. And I don't want to dive any deeper than that, because I feel like that's just wrong. And we made a blog post that seems to be our most frequented piece of content ever, called "Good in the Hood." So what we did is we took 7 data points, not boosterism, not Casey's and Albany Parker, so he's just going to tell you the good stuff. Hardcore data points that show asset-based pieces of information of kind of what's going good in that neighborhood. So it can be new business licenses. It can be public sector investment. It can be proposed projects. It can be building permits. Those are the 4 that come to my head. But yeah, if you Google Chicago Cityscape Good in the Hood, you'll see that blog post, because you're exactly right. Like, think about a chamber of commerce who's working hard to attract businesses or development in their section of the city. And the only thing the nightly news talks about is, the negative things that are happening there. And it's not to say that that doesn't happen, but I mean, you don't have to look very hard to find a lot of great things going on in Chicago communities. And if you look at it through a data lens, you can make a heck of a lot more accurate business decision as well. But like, way too often, like, the nightly news is who's controlling the narrative about those neighborhoods. So that's why we like to give that asset-based pieces of data to real estate brokers and community development corporations and of commerce so they can shape a more accurate narrative about their neighborhood.
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to ask you, what's the 39th ward? Where's the 39th ward?
Oh, it's the best part of the city of Chicago, don't you know? It consists of Albany Park, Mayfair, Edgebrook, Forest Glen, and Sauganash, and a little bit of Old Irving Park. So
Okay.
the northwest side of the city. It's very reflective of the city as a whole. I mean, you have a wide range of ethnic and racial and religious diversity. You've got every socioeconomic background in that section of the city. It's a great place to do business and raise a family. Absolutely love the 39th ward, even though I'm not representing them on city council. Still think it's a great place.
Well, there's always another time, Casey.
I think I'm a little better on the volunteer front and maybe donating some dough here and there. But it's politics is in my blood and I can't help it. It's another thing that I like about Cityscape, is what I wanted to do in my campaign was drive development and drive investment and drive businesses into my section of the city. Turns out I wasn't the right person for the job, and that's okay. But now, like, we work with older people to do that. But again, using data from Cityscape to, again, not just be a booster. People expect me to always say good things about Albany Park because I was there for so long, and I still will. But now I can back that up with a heck of a lot of data as well. Yeah.
Well, I think data is really important because it helps educate somebody, right? And if we don't have that education, we really miss the mark a lot of times in what we're trying to do. So if you're going to go build a building, or just call it McDonald's, if you're going to go build a McDonald's, but you pick the wrong corner because you didn't look at the data properly, you're not going to be as successful as you would be if you picked the other corner. So it's all based on the data.
And an example that we run into quite often now is think of like a community development corporation or a nonprofit housing developer or a market rate developer for that matter. Last July, the city changed and expanded what's called its transit-oriented development ordinance, also known as the Connected Communities Ordinance. It gets very complicated, but the short of the long is it allows a real estate developer to reduce their number of parking requirements and increase their number of dwelling units if two things. You're close enough to a transit asset and you're in the correct zoning districts. That's kind of complicated to understand on face value. But what you can do in Chicago Cityscape is just type an address in and see if it's eligible for the city's transit-oriented development bonus. I mean, that can be a couple thousand, that can be hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars that impact the pro forma of that building, being able to put more residential units and less parking units. But like, that's data.
Yeah.
Right. And it's also when policy changes, it's important to know how that's going to impact like your project and your development in your community. But like, now, like you're still going to need a zoning attorney at some point, but just to know if you're eligible for that policy, you don't have to pay an attorney, $1,500. You don't need an architect to produce a bunch of drawings. Yeah. So it really helps kind of accelerate that path to equitable development or desired investment.
Interesting. Well, listen, thanks for being here this morning. How do people get a hold of you, Casey?
Yeah. So I like what you're doing at the bottom of the screen there. My email is there, but also just going to chicagocityscape.com. We have a contact us button there. We also give our platform away for free in some ways. You can sign up for a 2-week free trial. Also, right now, we're so fortunate to have a strong relationship with the Chicago Community Trust. And if you are a minority or emerging real estate professional, you can actually get sponsored access through the Chicago Community Trust into our platform all the way through July. Or if you're a nonprofit, you can apply there as well. And all of that information is on our website. I'm also probably overly active on LinkedIn if anybody wants to reach out to me there. And I'm usually the only Casey Smagala that's on LinkedIn, so I'm pretty easy to find.
Not to be confused with Stan. Hey, thanks for being here this morning. If you ever know anybody who might have an interest in being on with me on Thursday morning, I'd love the referral. If I can ever do anything for you, don't hesitate to reach out. If I can connect you with somebody you're trying to find or help you or Cityscape in any way, don't hesitate to reach out. So.
I really appreciate that, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Hey, Casey, I'm going to go ahead and move you out. If you hang out with me for a minute, I'm going to say goodbye, and we'll call it a wrap in a minute.
Sounds good. All the best.
Thanks for being here. Everybody, that was interesting, huh? I always say it's in the data. It's just like when we look at multifamily property and we're deciding whether or not it's a market that we want to go in or even dive deeper, not just the market, but the submarket. We talked about different wards and aldermanic areas in the city of Chicago. And, Chicago's got 78 different neighborhoods. If you go to a market like Tampa, Florida, there's 15 submarkets. So you have to look at the data in those individual markets. So a company like Cityscape could benefit you in the Chicago market if you're a builder, developer, real estate person, or a business owner looking to open another restaurant or a new business. So get connected, get your data, reach out to Casey and see how he and Cityscape can be of service to you in your business. Thanks for being here. Remember, we're here every Thursday morning, 8:30. Have a different guest, have an interesting guest next week. Looking forward to that. I'll be broadcasting remotely next week, so I'm excited about that. And if I can do anything for anyone, don't hesitate to reach out. Send me an email, DM me. If you have questions, comments, if you know somebody who'd be a great guest on Thursday Morning Live, let me know.